Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I write this letter, my last letter, to you, Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney. I write not because I think you grasp the terrible human and moral consequence of your lies, manipulation, and thirst for wealth and power. I write this letter because before my own death, I want to make it clear that I and hundreds of thousands of my fellow veterans, along with millions of my fellow citizens, along with the hundreds of millions of more in Iraq and the Middle East, know fully who you are and what you've done.
As the nation marks Veterans Day, we remember Thomas Young, the paralyzed Iraq War veteran turned peace activist. He's just died at the age of 34. Last year, he published a message to George W. Bush and Dick Cheney from a dying veteran. We'll hear Thomas in his own words and speak to the legendary talk show host Phil Donahue, who co-directed a film about Thomas called Body of War.
I'd never seen a sacrifice this close up. And now that he's gone, I remember him now and always, especially on this Veterans Day. And I realized as I looked at him in bed, inert, that he was just one of thousands of young men and women who more than sacrificed for this nation.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama's issued his strongest statement to date in favor of a free and open Internet. In a video message, Obama called for the Federal Communications Commission to uphold the principle of net neutrality by classifying the Internet as a public utility. He said such protections would prevent Internet service providers, or ISPs like Comcast, from blocking access to websites, slowing down content, or providing paid fast lanes for Internet service.
Cable companies can't decide which online stores you can shop at or which streaming services you can use, and they can't let any company pay for priority over its competitors. To put these protections in place, I'm asking the FCC to reclassify Internet service under Title II of a law known as the Telecommunications Act. In plain English, I'm asking them to recognize that for most Americans, the Internet has become an essential part of everyday communication and everyday life.
Press freedom groups have soundly praised Obama's statement, which bolsters calls by nearly 4 million commenters who have urged the FCC to protect net neutrality. Free Press said in a statement, quote, "The president may have saved the Internet at the moment it was in the greatest jeopardy." President Obama's message comes in the wake of nationwide protests after reports the FCC planned to adopt a hybrid model that would apply expanded protections only to the relationship between Internet providers and content firms like Netflix, and not to the relationship between providers and users. The FCC is an independent agency, meaning Obama cannot directly control its actions. Obama's appointed chair of the FCC, Tom Wheeler, a former lobbyist for the cell phone and cable industries, says the agency will need more time to craft its new rules. A militant group in Egypt has pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. The declaration by the group Ansar Beit al-Mahdi comes amidst rumors over the fate of Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Iraq's defense minister has said al-Baghdadi was wounded and his deputy killed by a U.S. airstrike. The Pentagon has not confirmed any details. Iraq War veteran and anti-war activist Thomas Young has died just weeks before his 35th birthday. In 2004, Young was shot and paralyzed in Sadr City, Iraq. Last year, 10 years after the Iraq invasion, Thomas Young announced his intention to take his own life due to immense suffering from his injuries. He wrote a letter to former President George W. Bush and Vice President Dick Cheney, which he read on Democracy Now!
My day of reckoning is upon me. Yours will come. I hope you be put on trial, but mostly I hope, for your sakes, that you find the moral courage to face what you have done to me and to many, many others who deserve to live.
Thomas Young later decided to live, but he died this week at home in Seattle. We'll talk more about Thomas Young after headlines with Phil Donahue, who co-directed a film about Thomas called Body of War. As the United States marks Veterans Day today, the Department of Veterans Affairs has announced it may fire 1,000 staffers amidst a scandal over wait times and health care failures. Newly appointed VA Secretary Bob McDonald said care for veterans has improved.
We've developed something we call the Blueprint for Excellence to reestablish VA's leadership in health care. And we've begun what may become the largest restructuring in the department's history.
In Nigeria, a suicide bomber disguised as a student has killed nearly 50 boys at a boarding school in the town of Potiskum. The militant group Boko Haram is suspected of carrying out the attack. In India, at least 8 women have died and nearly 70 others are hospitalized after receiving sterilization surgeries with infected instruments as part of a government-run program. More than 80 women were reportedly operated on over a 6-hour period by a single doctor in the central state of Chhattisgarh. India offers free sterilizations as a way to curb population growth, often giving cash incentives that amount to the equivalent of a week's salary for the poor. Outrage continues in Mexico over the apparent massacre of 43 students by police and a drug gang in the southern state of Guerrero. On Monday, protesters blocked the international airport in the resort city of Acapulco for 3 hours after clashing with police. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has announced the creation of a panel to investigate deaths and damage at UN facilities during this summer's Israeli assault on Gaza, which killed nearly 2,200 Palestinians, mainly civilian. The inquiry will be led by a former Dutch general. The news comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to wage a crackdown after Palestinians killed an Israeli soldier and a woman in separate attacks in Tel Aviv and the West Bank. In the United States, a leading Palestinian activist has been jailed after she was found guilty of concealing her conviction on bomb charges by an Israeli military court more than 40 years ago. Rasmia Odeh says her confession to the bombings was obtained through torture and sexual assault in Israeli custody. Odeh moved to the United States in 1995 and serves as an associate director at the Chicago Area Arab American Action Network. Her supporters say she was targeted for prosecution on the immigration charge because of her role as a prominent supporter of Palestinian liberation. Odeh has been declared a flight risk and taken into custody ahead of sentencing in March. Her attorneys have vowed to appeal. A New York City doctor who was diagnosed with Ebola after treating patients in Guinea is due to be released from the hospital today after being declared Ebola-free. Dr. Craig Spencer was the city's first and only known case of Ebola. New York City's changing its response to marijuana possession. Police Commissioner William Bratton said instead of being arrested, people caught with small amounts of marijuana may receive a summons to appear in court and pay a fine if found guilty. But Bratton also noted exceptions to the policy.
Under the new policy, persons found to be in possession of this amount of marijuana, 25 grams or less, may be eligible to receive a summons in lieu of arrest, so summons instead of being arrested. However, I would point out there are exceptions to the provisions of this new department policy. It should be made very clear that persons who are burning and or smoking marijuana in public will still be subject to arrest.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio criticized low-level marijuana arrests during his campaign, but according to the Drug Policy Alliance, police conducted more arrests for marijuana possession from March to August under de Blasio than during the same period the previous year under Mayor Bloomberg. 86% of those arrested for marijuana possession in the first 8 months of this year were African-American or Latino. Imprisoned journalist and former Black Panther Mumia Abu-Jamal has filed a lawsuit challenging a new Pennsylvania law he says violates his free speech. The measure was introduced after Abu Jamal gave a pre-taped commencement address at his alma mater, Vermont's Goddard College. His speech was opposed by Pennsylvania officials and the widow of Daniel Faulkner, the police officer whom Abu Jamal was convicted of killing. The law authorizes the censoring of prisoners' public addresses if judges agree that letting them speak would cause mental anguish to victims. A 30-year-old audio recording has been released publicly for the first time, which shows then U.S. President Ronald Reagan apologizing to British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher over the U.S. invasion of Grenada. The United States invaded the small Caribbean nation in 1983 after the assassination of leftist President Maurice Bishop. Within months, a pro-U.S. government was installed. While the fighting was still underway, Reagan called Thatcher to apologize for not warning her in advance of his plan to invade Grenada, which is part of the British Commonwealth.
If I were there, Margaret, I'd throw my hat in the door before I came in.
Oh, no need to do that.
President Reagan went on to apologize for any embarrassment caused to Britain. And 3 civil rights activists murdered by the Ku Klux Klan in 1964 after traveling to Mississippi to register black voters in the South have been posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. The murders of James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Mickey Schwerner shocked the country and propelled the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. Other recipients of this year's Medal of Freedom include Chilean novelist Isabel Allende and Native American activist Suzanne Harjo. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As the nation marks Veterans Day, we begin today's show remembering the Iraq War veteran Thomas Young, who died this week at the age of 34. On April 4, 2004, he was sent to Iraq. His 5th day in Iraq, Thomas Young's unit came under fire in the Baghdad neighborhood of Sadr City. Thomas was shot, left paralyzed, never to walk again. Thomas returned home to become an active member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. He remained in and out of the hospital for the rest of his life. Thomas was later featured in the documentary Body of War, directed by Ellen Spiro and the legendary television broadcaster Phil Donahue. In a moment, Phil Donahue will join us in the studio. But first, we turn to an excerpt from the film featuring Thomas Young speaking in 2005 at the Lafayette Presbyterian Church in Brooklyn, New York, about President George W. Bush and the Iraq War.
You'll have to excuse me for a little bit. I get a little lightheaded every now and again, so hold on. I'd also like to, that during this speech I may say the word a lot and stammer a little bit, so forgive me for sounding a bit presidential. I called my recruiter on around September 13, 2001, when, if you all can remember, the president stood on the rubble with the bullhorn and said we were going to get the evildoers that did this. And oh man, hold on a second, I'm starting to... Yeah. We're good. Thank you. All right, let's hope that's a little better. But and he led the rah-rah around the country and got everybody really excited, and I was excited. And I wanted to go to Afghanistan and get the people that did this to us. But after I joined the Army, it became clear and clear to me that we weren't going to go to Afghanistan, that we were going to go to Iraq. And more and more it began to feel, with statements like George Bush saying that he sought the approval of a higher father than his own, and things like that. It really concerned me that President Bush was trying to use Jesus Christ as an advocate for the war. But I always remembered, at least from the Bible that I read, Jesus Christ was always about peaceful things and love and whatsoever you do unto the least of my brother, you do unto me. And it just shocks me that a man who tries to live his life by such devout Christian philosophies seems to skew so much on this one issue. I don't really... I have to, excuse me again. Sorry, it's a little hard to regulate my body temperature, and it is hot up here. But I heard somebody once say that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So just everybody keep together and stay strong, and one day we'll get what we need to get done. And thank y'all for waiting, and I hope I didn't disappoint.
That was Thomas Young speaking in 2005. It was broadcast in the documentary Body of War. He died this week at the age of 34. Joining us now, the legendary talk show host Phil Donahue, who co-directed the film Body of War. So we believe late on Sunday night, early Monday morning, Thomas died at home with his wife Claudia in Seattle. They just moved there, Phil. Can you talk about how you came to know Thomas?
I met Thomas Young in 2005. He was shot in April of 2004. So we're 10 years and 7 months later now, during which time he has been trapped in a bed. And I was with Ralph Nader, and he said, a mother at Walter Reed wants to see me. Do you want to go? I said, yeah. So off we go, and here is this young 24-year-old in bed, whacked out on morphine, having just arrived from Landstuhl, whacked out on morphine. And his mother, as I stood and looked down, his mother explained his injury to me. Thomas is a T4, that's between the shoulder blades. So the bullet came down and exited T4 on the spine, so he's paralyzed from the nipples down. And I said, people should see this. This is the most sanitized war of my lifetime. If you're going to send all these young men and women to war, show the pain. Don't sanitize the war. And 5 years later, we came out with this film, this documentary, Body of War, which, by the way, won a lot of awards, was on the short list for an Oscar. But we sold no popcorn. This is not a take your girl to the movie, but it is available on Netflix.
Let's go to another clip of Body of War. Thomas Young lists the array of medications he has to take every day. The list is interspersed with the Senate roll call vote authorizing the Iraq War. But first, you hear the voices of President Bush and supporters of war around the time Congress voted to authorize the invasion.
Saddam Hussein is harboring terrorists.
Harbors these terrorists, aid, comfort, and sanctuary to terrorists.
We know that Iraq and the al-Qaeda terrorist network share a common enemy, the United States of America.
Wonder if the Bushes and the people at Fox News and people like that had a big sigh of relief when the hurricane hit. I know it's a horrible tragedy, they must have said, but thank God we don't have to talk about Cindy. My pill box separates them out for the week. This is carbamazepine. It is a nerve pain medication.
Ms. Collins, aye.
This is a drug called Coumadin, and it's a blood thinner.
Mr. Craig, aye.
This is tizanidine. It's an antispasm medication.
Mr. Crapo, aye.
This is gabapentin.
Mr. Daschle.
It's a nerve pain medication.
Aye.
This is bupropion.
Mr. DeWine.
It's an antidepressant.
Aye.
This is omeprazole.
Mr. Dodd.
It's for morning nausea.
Aye.
And this is morphine. It's a narcotic, And in this situation, the effect is not to get high, but to kill pain. And so I have to take more and more of it to stop the pain.
That was Thomas Young, interspersed with the vote for war in Congress. Phil Donahue, before we go to break, how you came to know Thomas in the making of this film?
Well, after meeting him at Walter Reed, I thought about a book, and then I thought, well, I've been in TV. My my career has had moving pictures. And although I had never made a film, Dee Halleck, who is a longtime progressive figure who was responsible for Dish TV, who I met on an airplane.
The legendary public access producer.
Yes. And she gave me a number, and I called, and a woman answered, and I said, hello, I'm Phil Donahue. And she said, no, you're not. And I thought, well, thank God she recognized me. This is a cold call. We met at the Kansas City airport and went directly to see Thomas, and she immediately embraced the idea. And she turned out to be fabulous. I got very lucky. I mean, she didn't know me, really, and I certainly didn't know her. And somehow she survived this almost 5-year professional relationship with me. And her work is very evident in the film, I think.
We're going to go to break, and we come back. We're going to look at Thomas over the years after he returned from Iraq. He was wounded April 4th, 2004 in Sadr City, the same day that Casey Sheehan, the son of Cindy Sheehan, the well-known peace activist, was also killed. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.
I speak for a man who gave for this land, took a bullet in the back for his pain. He spilled his blood in the dirt and the dust, and he's come back to say, what he has seen is hard to believe, and it does no good to just pray. All he asked of us to stand, and we must in this war today. With his mind he sinned, no more with his heart he sinned, no more with his life he sinned, no more war. With his eyes he sinned, no more with his body he sinned, no more with his voice he sinned, no more war, no more war. Oh, nothing's too good for veterans.
That's Eddie Vedder singing the song No More. It was a song he wrote for Thomas Young and for the film Body of War. Our guest today is Phil Donahue, who made that film with Ellen Spiro. As we remember Thomas Young, I'm Amy Goodman. This is Democracy Now! As the nation marks Veterans Day, we remember Thomas Young, who died just weeks shy of his 35th birthday. On April 4th, 2004, his 5th day in Iraq, Thomas Young's unit came under fire in the Baghdad neighborhood of Sadr City. Thomas was shot, left paralyzed, never to walk again. In 2008, Thomas Young appeared on Democracy Now! We had just come back from the Winter Soldier hearings in Maryland, where soldiers testified about the war. And many of those soldiers had last been just a few days before in Austin at South by Southwest, and they had seen the release of Body of War. I talked to Thomas Young and asked him to talk about the response to the film and what it meant to him.
Well, it's been an amazing honor to travel the country with this music that I'm putting out on this album, and the movie that has been an amazing experience to make, and to reach out to soldiers that are speaking out against this war, and to try to touch lives on an individual basis has been an incredible experience. But right off the bat, I have to address something that Dick Cheney said yesterday.
Maybe we have a clip. Maybe we have a clip of what Dick Cheney had to say. Let's give it a try. I think this is from our headlines today. This is the Vice President, Dick Cheney.
The president carries the biggest burden, obviously. He's the one who has to make the decision to commit young Americans. But we are fortunate to have a group of men and women, all volunteer force, who voluntarily put on the uniform and go in harm's way for the rest of us.
That was Dick Cheney. Thomas Young, was that the quote you'd like to address?
Absolutely. From one of those soldiers who volunteered to go to Afghanistan after September 11th, which was where the evidence said we needed to go, to the master of the college deferment in Vietnam, the last conflict we didn't go into voluntarily. Many of us volunteered with patriotic feelings in our heart, only to see them subverted and bastardized by the administration and sent into the wrong country. Yes, we volunteered, but we didn't volunteer where you sent us to go. And I realize that we don't choose where we get to go, but we at least should be sent in the right places to defend the Constitution, just as we volunteered to do.
Thomas,
that's all.
I wanted to go to a part of the film, Body of War, which was the White House Correspondents' Dinner of 2005. It's very interesting because you were watching it. It includes President Bush joking around about the missing WMDs, as well as First Lady Laura Bush. This is the clip.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there. Maybe under here.
I said to him the other day, George, if you really want to end tyranny in the world, you're going to have to stay up later. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a desperate housewife.
They're so insulated. They don't want to know about people like Thomas.
How you doing, buddy?
And the 4 or 5% of the population that is actually sacrificing for this war.
That last voice is Thomas Young's mother, Kathy Smith. Thomas Young is shown in the film watching the White House Correspondents' Dinner and hugging his little brother. Thomas, your reaction to the skit?
Well, my reaction is twofold. I'd like to tell Laura Bush that there are probably a couple thousand desperate housewives who are quite missing their husbands and would love to have their husbands there to go to bed early before 9 o'clock. And for the president to be so glib about a lie that he told the American people and my brothers and sisters in arms to get us to go to war so blindly and patriotically for this country, it's offensive to me as a soldier first and as an American second. And now that clip that I was watching was recorded from the year previous, so I had a full year for that wound to fester and boil as far as my anger and resentment at the president making that joke and looking around the Oval Office as if the weapons of mass destruction were under his desk.
Thomas, I wanted to go to, well, near the end of the film, when you meet Democratic Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia. We've been playing his impassioned speeches on the floor of the Senate, which figure prominently in the film. In this clip, Senator Byrd proudly reads to you the names of all the 23 senators who voted against authorizing the invasion of Iraq.
Now I'm going to read you the names of these.
The immortal 23?
The immortal 23. All right, here we are. HJ Res 114. That's the resolution.
Senators voting in the negative.
Here are the 23. Akaka.
Mr. Akaka, no.
Bingaman.
Mr. Bingaman, no.
Boxer.
Mrs. Boxer, no.
Byrd. B-Y-R-D, right there.
Mr. Byrd, no.
Chafee. Republican.
He's a good man.
Mr. Chafee, no.
He stood with us. Conrad.
Mr. Conrad, no.
What's that one?
Like John Corzine.
Corzine, yes.
Mr. Corzine, no.
I don't have my glasses on. What's that one there?
Dayton?
Dayton, yeah. God bless him. He's leaving us after this year.
Mr. Dayton, no.
Who's that?
That's Senator Durbin.
Durbin? This one?
Senator Feingold.
Feingold?
That'd be Bob Graham from Florida, I think, Senator.
Yes, it would be.
Mr. Durbin, no. Mr. Feingold, no. Mr. Graham of Florida, no.
We go all the way down here to Daniel Inouye.
Mr. Inouye.
Yeah, there's a man who has really sacrificed. He gave his arm.
From Hawaii, yeah.
No.
Yes, sir. He's a real hero.
There's another one of my heroes, Jim
Jeffords.
Senator Jeffords.
Yeah,
switch sides of the aisle.
He's one of my heroes, too.
Mr. Jeffords, no.
Kennedy. Leahy and Levin.
Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Levin, no.
McCoskey.
Ms. McCoskey, no.
Murray.
Mrs. Murray.
Hattie Murray.
No.
Reed from Rhode Island. Sarbanes.
Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, no. Mr. Sarbanes, no.
Stabenow.
Yeah, Debbie Stabenow.
Miss Stabenow, no.
Wellstone, that's the man who gave his life shortly thereafter.
And then Wyden.
And Wyden, he's still here.
Mr. Wellstone, no. Mr. Wyden, no.
23. 77 to 23. The immortal 23. Our founders would be so proud. Thank you for your service. Man, you've made a great sacrifice. You served your country well.
As of you, sir.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
The late Senator Robert Byrd, meeting with and talking to the late Iraq War veteran and peace activist Thomas Young. It's from the film Body of War, which is co-directed by our guest today, Phil Donahue. What a moment, Phil.
Yeah. It was a chapter of our lives. I mean, none of us who worked on this film had been that close to such a debilitating injury. And it was a spiritual experience we'll never forget.
You have a very difficult section of Body of War showing Thomas Young's mother, Kathy Smith, helping him insert a catheter.
I'm gonna lift up and you're gonna sit down under me.
Okay.
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 Oh, this is hard to do from this angle. Help me out here, Mom?
Yeah.
Must be hard to do. I may need to change those. Okay, now, in this bag, you're gonna take this lube out. Okay. Instead of lubing up the end of that, you're going to lube the head of the penis.
Okay.
because it uses less lube. You're just going to lube right over the hole.
Like that?
And now you're just going to insert the catheter. And I really kind of wanted you to put the glove on the hand that was going to put the catheter in. But, okay. You seriously can push it a little quicker than that.
No, I can't.
Are you nervous?
Yeah.
Oh.
I've never done this before.
Okay.
Is it coming out?
Yeah, it's coming out. Oh. Hey, Juan. We generally tend to watch what goes on up there.
I'm trying to move it so it doesn't just go everywhere.
Good plan. I saw it that worked swimmingly. Look at that. You got pee on your hand.
I know. You know what? It's not the first time I've had your pee on my hand.
That's Thomas Young's mother, Kathy Smith, with Thomas as she tried to help him insert a catheter. That moment, Phil. They were in Washington, D.C., right, at an anti-war protest?
No, that was en route to... Oh, wait a minute. Ellen shot that en route to, I think, see Nathan off, her younger son.
Well, this is very important, see him off to war.
Right. They went, and we have that scene in the film of her saying goodbye to her younger son. She explains, I could get him out. You know, she's already sacrificed one son. They don't, but he wanted to go. So, brothers. And of course, he's a big boy now, and she was not able to talk him out of signing up to serve.
So Thomas Young became very active in Iraq Veterans Against the War. Can you talk about his activism and his struggle against his pain?
Well, he was a member of Iraq Vets Against the War. A lot of relationships developed between Thomas and other members of that group. He was hugely impressive in his speeches, although he often had to stop because his respiratory system was not as it should be because of the paralysis.
And he would bend over in his wheelchair.
And have to gather more oxygen for himself. In hot weather, he would put gels in a vest, ice gels from the freezer into the vest, just to cool his body temperature. I mean, these are just some of the things that people didn't see. People didn't see the cleaning of the bed sores and the changing of the bed clothing after the catheter broke. A urinary tract infection. I mean, it just, the more you see this, and there are thousands and thousands of homes in this country as we speak, dealing with this kind of burden that turns the whole family upside down, and nobody sees it.
In February of 2013, Thomas Young stunned an audience gathered to watch the film Body of War when he joined them via Skype after the film and made this announcement. You have to listen closely.
In July of last year, I began to experience sharp pains in my abdomen. And I went to the VA, and they treated me like I was a second-class citizen, a junkie looking for pain meds just to get high. You know, I was genuinely in pain. I went to a private hospital, treated much better. They suggested a colostomy to remove my colon. I thought that would reduce the pain. It did for a few days, but the pain came rocketing back. And I decided to go on hospice care. So now I have a pump that provides the same IV medication the hospital provided And after my 1 anniversary with my wife, I will begin to wean myself off of food and one day go away.
That was Thomas Young announcing he would die. He couldn't tolerate the pain. Claudia Cuellar, his wife, was sitting next to him on this Skype after the showing of Body of War in Litchfield, Connecticut. Phil, when did you get word of this, that he was planning to do this? You heard that night? Were you in Litchfield?
I did. I heard, I'm guessing the week before he called me, a Saturday morning. And, you know, I have to say I couldn't, you know, if you say, oh, Thomas, please don't, Thomas, you know, you suddenly realize it's a selfish thing to say. You're saying, I want you to live. And you're not really appreciating or at least having some empathy for what he wants. So even when he made that announcement at a Litchfield theater, Litchfield, Connecticut, the audience was very, I would say, sympathetic toward his decision. I'm sure there were many there who wished he wasn't doing this, but they understood it. And that was a remarkable...
Can you talk about the deterioration to the point where we saw what caused him in the end, although he was always in pain, to be experiencing such severe pain? We're talking about 10 years after his injury.
Thomas, about, it's all a blur to me now, but I'll have to think 6, 7 years ago, after we had completed the film, sustained a swollen right arm, and it hurt. And they went immediately to the emergency room, and they gave him pain pills at the VA. And he came home, and I think not long after that, he was discovered in a coma. Thomas sustained a pulmonary embolism, which, as you know, is oxygen deprivation to the brain. And you heard his speech there, how his speech became very labored. And he also couldn't hold silverware. He could bend his fingers, but he couldn't, and he had to be fed. And they had to find a corner in a restaurant on those few times when they went out, so the people wouldn't stare at them as she fed him. These are just some of the things people didn't see in this sanitized war.
Well, last year, after Thomas made this announcement, he joined us on Democracy Now! A TV crew went to his house in Kansas City, and they filmed him as he and his wife, Claudia, came on Democracy Now! And he read an open letter he wrote called A Message to George W. Bush and Dick Cheney from a Dying Veteran. Listen carefully. This is an excerpt.
I write this letter, my last letter, to you, Mr. Bush and Mr. Cheney. I write not because I think you grasp the terrible human and moral consequence of your lies, manipulation, and thirst for wealth and power. I write this letter because before my own death, I want to make it clear that I and hundreds of thousands of my fellow veterans, along with millions of my fellow citizens, along with the hundreds of millions of more in Iraq and the Middle East, know fully who you are and what you've done.
That was Thomas Young. Ultimately, at that time, he decided not to take his own life. After reading that, he got so much enormous response all over the country. But they moved to Seattle, and he died in his sleep late Sunday night, early Monday morning.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he did. And Claudia called me on very early Monday morning. It was on my cell phone. You know, and I've been waiting for the call for 10 years. I have to say that. You know, every time her or his area code came up, I thought, this is it. So finally it happened, and he's at peace, and we we have to take some positive away from this. I think Thomas made an enormous impact on those that he met and those people who saw him and what he went through. He was really the town crier for all those other veterans. We're up now to over almost 3,000 in Afghanistan. So we're coming up on 6,000 in Iraq and Afghanistan. Irreplaceable human beings who will, never see a child confirmed, Holy Communion, Bar Mitzvah, all the wonderful things in life that they will never, ever experience because of this massive blunder.
And that is the American soldiers, as Thomas would point out. We
Yes,
don't know the number
Yes,
of
he would.
Iraqis and Afghans who have died.
Right, we're not even sure. And certainly over 4 million refugees, people living out of laundry bags.
Phil, you, after your legendary career, 29 years on the Phil Donahue Show, you came back and were continued to broadcast on MSNBC prime time slot right before the invasion of Iraq. You were the most popular show on MSNBC at the time. And then right before the war, you were unceremoniously dumped. And a secret later memo came out of NBC that they didn't want to have an anti-war voice as their flagship show as the other networks were waving the American flag.
Yes, that was a memo published by the New York Times, and it was written up by a Republican pollster who took a survey where they put 25 people in a room and showed them one of my aggressive programs, and most of the people didn't like me, was the result. I was called into Neil Shapiro's office and informed.
He was at NBC
He was
at
then,
the time.
yeah, he's now head of PBS here in New York. So it was definitely a political termination. And it's interesting because during that time, they were terrified of this. You should know that this is October through, say, August through January, August of 2002 through January and February. The invasion was April of 2003, and I was gone by then. But this is not long after the towers. And so, corporate media...
You were replaced by Michael Savage.
I was replaced by Michael Savage. So they couldn't wait to outfox Fox. And I had to have two conservatives for every liberal. And they wanted me to do entertainers, don't do political. It's a very interesting study in the thinking at that time. Liberals were terrifying to them. They were afraid of liberals. Liberals weren't patriotic. Liberals were blaming the victim. Dissent was totally, totally unwelcome.
And yet you persisted, knowing the climate.
Well, I guess so. I mean, at my own peril. But, no sad songs for me. I'm a lucky guy. I got a little money, but we have to wonder whose voice wasn't heard, that didn't have the kind of ability to do this kind of thing and at least survive a little while. Well, interesting, really. At that time, half the political voice in this nation was silenced, really. And I believe most people at that time opposed this war. Most people did. They thought, what are we, why, how come over there? And yet, every major metropolitan newspaper in this country supported the invasion of Iraq. Think about that for a minute. Every major metropolitan. This is what you can do with the politics of fear. The Bush took this whole nation and the whole media establishment by the ear and led it right into the sword. amazing in the land of free speech, free press.
Do you see the same thing happening again right now?
Well, obviously you can see that it has slowed us up. But it looks like that's all it's done. And while we have been, hesitant and not bring them on with the war lust that we had then, mission creep is underway. What happens when somebody is taken prisoner? I mean, we have become a warrior nation, and we have no respect for diplomacy. And we've just stood mute while the Constitution has been just shredded. This is a nation of law unless we're scared.
Well, Phil, you certainly continue to provide a voice for people to speak for themselves in the making of this remarkable film, as we remember Thomas Young, who died just shy of his 35th birthday, Iraq War veteran, active member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. If you want to see his reading of his full letter, his letter from a dying soldier, a dying veteran to George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. And you spoke of being a lucky guy, Phil. Well, another of the reasons you are so lucky is your wonderful wife, Marlo Thomas. And I want to congratulate you and her. Among the 19 recipients of this year's Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, is the award-winning actress, producer, author, activist Marlo Thomas, who is the wife of our guest, Phil Donahue, or he is her husband. The White House said in a statement, quote, "Whether championing equality for girls and women, giving voice to the less fortunate, breaking barriers by portraying one of the television's first single working women on That Girl, or teaching children to be free to be you and me, Thomas inspires us all to dream bigger and reach higher." The awards will be presented at the White House on November 24th. Congratulations.
I'll say hello for you.
When we come back, we're going to play some clips on this Veterans Day of veterans' voices. We'll be bringing you StoryCorps. Thanks so much, Phil.
Pleasure.
Will you be talking to President Obama, perhaps, about any of the issues we've talked about today?
Well, it's not likely I'll get that opportunity, so I'll be a good husband and try to stay small. Not easy for a talk show host.
Phil Donahue, our guest. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. Back in a minute.
Covered truck, the captain laughed and said good luck as we rolled on through our first Iraqi town. From the rooftop we got blasted, Danny Lode's spine came unfastened, stray bullets raining on town. Whoa, whoa, hey, hey, I sail away. Whoa, whoa, hey, hey, slide on down. Whoa, whoa, hey, hey, what's lost you gave away. Stray bullets raining on down, downtown. Stray bullets raining on down. Lost in Iraq, we got stopped, lost, they sent us back.
Stray Bullets by Tom Morello. Yesterday, he posted a message on Twitter reading, "Rest in peace, Thomas Young, warrior for peace, veteran against war, herb enthusiast, wise friend, wrote this for him." This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We end this Veterans Day broadcast with StoryCorps, the award-winning National Social History Project, the largest oral history project in the United States. 2 years ago, StoryCorps launched the Military Voices Initiative, recording the stories of post-9/11 military veterans and their families. And this Veterans Day, StoryCorps is releasing a series of animations and a radio special based on these interviews. The story you're about to hear features Specialist Justin Clyburn, who deployed to Iraq with Oklahoma Army National Guard in 2005. While serving in Baghdad, Clyburn formed an unlikely friendship with 2 Iraqi boys who lived nearby. Justin speaks with his wife, Deanne, about the lasting impression the boys left on his life.
One day, we saw this child walking through the compound. His name was Ali, and he did not want to talk to us.
As opposed to a lot of the other Iraqi kids that you encountered?
Yes, he was very shy. And the second or third time that I met him, he brought his best friend, Ahmed. And Ahmed was much more outgoing. And so Ali really opened up. And once I met these children, it made every day something I looked forward to. We would play rock, paper, scissors. We would kick around a soccer ball. We were about as close as people that don't speak the same language can be. I had never been really good with children. And this was the first time I felt like I loved someone who wasn't my family member. But one day, Ali showed up, and I could tell something wasn't right. He kept saying, Ahmed, Ahmed, boom. We learned that Ahmed and his mother went to the gas station, and a suicide bomber detonated. Ahmed's mother is dead. She died instantly. And Ahmed is in a hospital somewhere. And so other soldiers and I collected what cash we had and gave it to Ali and said, go take this to Ahmed's father. But later, I saw Ali walking up very slow, and he sat down on the curb next to my Humvee. He dug a hole in the ground with his fingers. He picked up a rock and put it in the hole, and then he put the dirt back over it, and he just pointed to the ground and said, Ahmed. And I knew that Ahmed was dead. And so I sat on the curb with him, me in desert camouflage, carrying an M4 rifle, and him, just a North Baghdad kid, just sat there and cried. I don't know what came of him. That's the nature of war, I suppose. But whenever I see any footage from Baghdad, I'm always kind of looking around, wondering if he's in the frame.
That was Specialist Justin Clyburn speaking to his wife, Deanne. Just one of the many stories featured in the Military Voices Initiative by StoryCorps this Veterans Day, releasing the series of animations and a radio special based on these interviews. And that does it for our broadcast. For all our interviews with Thomas Young, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. Also, we are posting online at democracynow.org part 2 of our interview with Matthew Ho. He is the former Marine Corps company commander in Iraq, who was the highest level State Department official to quit over the war in Afghanistan. He talks about dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. Go to our website to see this interview at democracynow.org. On Thursday, I'll be speaking in Maplewood, New Jersey at Columbia High School Auditorium at 7:30. Saturday, I'll be in Berlin, Germany, Compact's 10th anniversary. Check our website. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Renee Feltz, Aaron Mate, Nermin Sheikh, Steve Martinez, Sam Alkoff, Hani Massoud, Ravi Karen, Dina Guzder, Amy Littlefield. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.